Hi, I'm Greg Corombos. My guest at this time is Rachel Greszler. She's a research fellow in economics, budgets, and entitlements at the Heritage Foundation. Today we want to get her insights into the economic fallout of legislation passed in California, ostensibly designed to protect workers. But the real-world impact seems to be a lot of lost jobs. At issue is what's known as Assembly Bill 5. It was passed earlier this year and goes into effect January 1st. As a result, businesses are now making personnel decisions to comply with the incoming law, and it's not good for a lot of folks who consider themselves independent workers. And Rachel, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
Well, Assembly Bill 5 was designed to protect freelance professionals, everything from writers to Uber drivers and many more engaged in what's become known as the gig economy. But instead of protections, we're seeing major layoffs. So what was the point of the bill, and what does it actually do?
I think the bill was trying to respond to a tiny subset of independent workers or gig economy workers who were upset that they didn't receive the traditional benefits that other employees do when they have a more formal employer. And so they didn't have the health insurance, or they didn't have disability insurance and these other benefits. But yet the overwhelming majority of people who either choose to work on their own or to participate in the gig economy do so because they're willing to give up those things in exchange for flexibility, setting their own hours, the opportunity to earn more income than they otherwise would working for an employer. And so this was sold as something that was going to bring in new benefits and give them more protections, higher wages, and we're seeing the exact opposite happen. And instead, people are losing their job entirely because of this law. And this is really problematic in California, particularly as the state and a lot of the big cities there are facing serious problems with homelessness and high poverty levels.
So what exactly does the law call for? You have written about this. I think you wrote about it back in September, and you said there's an ABC test in this legislation that makes it almost impossible to remain your own boss. So what exactly is the test?
Yes, so the ABC test is a three-part test. Now, compared to what we've traditionally considered the test, is that you just say, does the employee exercise their own control over the job? Is the employer in charge of them, telling them exactly how to perform their job, or does the employee have the ability to decide how they do that? Like the Uber driver, they decide what hours they work, what customers they pick up. They don't have to call in sick or ask for days off. They're kind of doing that autonomously. And so that was the main test that is typically applied. But what the California rule, the AB5 law, puts in is these B and C components. And so that says that the worker has to also perform work that is outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business. A good example of this is my sister owns a small veterinary clinic, and it's almost all female doctors there. And so she contracts out to get relief doctors to come into the business, particularly when somebody's had a baby and they're out on maternity leave. Under the ABC test, she would be prohibited from doing that because the person that she is contracting with is part of the usual course of her business. And then there's the C test, and that says that the worker is customarily engaged in an independently established trade, occupation, or business of the same nature as the work that's being performed. That basically says you can't hire anybody to contract to do work for you unless they're kind of a well-established person. They're out there working for multiple different clients. They are promoting themselves through marketing, and they're essentially a business. And so it just makes it really difficult for companies to contract out to get the work done that they need to. And this is particularly harmful to smaller businesses who tend to employ 4.7 contractors on average because they don't have the resources to treat those individuals as full-time employees, and they don't have enough work to give them. And so instead they use contracting, and you have people who might work for 3 different businesses, or maybe they work for 30 different businesses, and they choose to do that type of independent work as opposed to just working for one particular employer who tells them when to show up and what to do.
So you've just touched on this, Rachel, but dig a little deeper. What goes into the mind now of an employer who doesn't really have these people as formal employees? They contract with them as needed. The decisions now to essentially let them go, is it simply because the state is requiring them to make these people formal employees, or else they can't keep them on?
Exactly. You either need to offer that person a full-time or part-time formal employee position, or you can't hire them anymore. Now, there are a lot of exceptions to the California law based on who had enough power and money to lobby for these, like the doctors and the lawyers and the insurance brokers. But for most people in California, if they can't treat that individual as a full-time employee, then they can't use their services. And so we're seeing media companies that are laying off hundreds of freelance writers because they can't give them full-time work or even part-time guaranteed work with all the benefits. And so these people are losing their jobs, but these aren't necessarily people who are just working for that one company or who even want to have a formal employment situation. A lot of the times it's people who are doing this on the side as part of a gig that they just want to start getting into a certain area, or they package together 10 different gigs and that's their own employment situation they've got going on. It gives them flexibility. And so it's really destroying that type of work, and these businesses will keep operating the same way in other states, but not in California. They're kind of closing off that segment of the market.
We're talking with Rachel Greszler of the Heritage Foundation. And Rachel, I don't want to mix bureaucratic intrusion examples here, but it almost smacks a little bit of the employer mandate, where the government gets so involved in a business's operations that it really gets into the minutia. And as a result, the business owners end up having to take steps they really don't want to take in order to prevent themselves from getting absolutely buried in healthcare costs or anything else.
Yeah, that's exactly what it does, and it's not helping anybody here. The workers don't want this type of situation. They're choosing, the freelance or the independent work, and the employers want to be able to run their businesses in the most efficient way and employ as many people, whether it's through contracts or formal employment, as possible. It's just not. It's not helping anybody here. It's done in the name of protecting workers, but you're really hurting them.
So do you expect the backlash to this to mean that the legislature reconsiders this, or do you expect this is just going to stay like this?
I mean, unfortunately, they're probably going to just keep making more and more little carve-outs, but that's not the way that you do business. You should be creating a level playing field for everybody and creating a we're open for business type economy. We want to promote jobs and we want people's incomes to grow, and that's not what they're doing here by sending a signal that you need to have enough money to come up to the state legislature and lobby us for an exemption if you want to stay in business.
Well, something certainly to watch. California, a huge part of our economy, and a lot of folks very upset with something they didn't see coming, some of whom even actually liked it when this bill passed. But now that it's coming to impact the people that they do business with, not so much. Rachel, thanks so much for being with us today. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, Greg.
You bet. Rachel Greszler, Research Fellow in Economics, Budgets, and Entitlements at the Heritage Foundation. I'm Greg Columbus reporting for Radio America.